We're on.
All right, we're off. And Daf Yomi this week is sponsored by Mr. Loiterman of Norfolk, Virginia, in honor of the Kahal Yereim and Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi program. Daf Yomi this week is also sponsored by Rabbi Glenn Black, Zecher Nishmas Nechemia Ben Yaakov, Zichron Levracha. And today being Wednesday, the Daf is sponsored by Ralph and Lital Krombi, Bischos Refuah Shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra, should have a Refuah Shlema. We go to the second line of Kufay and Daled, Amud Aleph, finishing up the what we've been talking about. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Barchana says, Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Makom Sheshana Rav Shimon Gamliel b'Mishnah Seinu, a nice generality. Whenever you see Rav Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah, halacha kamosa, the halacha always follows Rav Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah. Good to know. Chutz, ... except me'arev v'tzidon v'rayach rona, except three cases, three times in all Shas. One is ours. This circumstance where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is talking about an Arev, the halacha is not like him. And the case of Tzidon is the case where a person says that in a get, he says that he's going to divorce his wife if he transfers over a certain garment to him, but the garment is lost. So the question is, can you replace that garment with the value of that garment? He says yes. The halacha is not like him, that it was specifically intended that the garment that is being specified was the one that was meant, so the get is not valid. And the other one is Rayach Rona. Rayach Rona is a case we're going to learn in Sanhedrin shortly, where a person comes to Beis Din and he says that they say to him, do you have any witnesses on something? He says, no, I'm afraid I don't. Then he goes home and he comes back and he goes, actually, I do. So the question is, can you believe the fact that he has witnesses, or is that fishy? Right? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, you can believe him, those witnesses are fine, others disagree with him, and this, we don't follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion in that case either. So there's a three circumstances, but it's good to know, whenever you see Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in a Mishnah, the halacha is like him. Amar Rav Huna says, Halvo va'ani arev, let's say somebody says, lend him the money, and I will be the guarantor. Halvo v'ani poreya, he says, lend him the money and I'll pay. Halveo v'ani chayev, lend it to him and I will be obligated. Halveo v'ani, we changed the girsa to Vani.
What's that?
Well, he says no sin in the text here. He says Vani etain, right? Lend it to him and I will give, right? Etain is the future tense. That makes more sense. Kulon.
What's the reason they changed it?
Because no sin is I am giving present tense. Etain makes more sense. It's the future tense, right? Kulon lashon arev was hain. All of those are the are examplos of languages that form guarantees in a contract. Tainlo, if he says, give it to him, vani kablan, and I will be the guarantor. So, tainlo vani porek, give it to him and I will pay. Give it to him, tainlo vani chayav, and I will be obligated. Tainlo vani etain, give it to him and I will give it back to you. Kulan lashon kablonos, that is the more stricter form, that is kablonos. Now, we started talking a little bit about yesterday, the difference between arevus and kablonos, right, is that arevus is I plan to pay if he doesn't pay. When somebody says give, pay, you're actually establishing, and this we will draw a little diagram, right? We're actually establishing, we've got a guarantor, right? And we've got a lender and we've got a borrower. In a circumstance of arevus, the lender gives money to a borrower, right? And the guarantor then says, I'll guarantee it. So what the lender has to do in order to get money, he goes to the borrower first and then to the guarantor. However, if the person says to the lender, I'm your guarantor, so then really the relationship is here. The guarantor is telling the lender, you give it to this fellow, and it really goes almost like this. The guarantor has formed a relationship with the lender because he's saying, you give it to him. So he's inserting himself at a different stage of the process. Since he's doing that, he becomes a couple and he becomes much more involved in the guarantee of the loan. And so therefore, that's why we might go back to the Kabbalah more easily than we would go to the Arev. Okay, so the Gemara says, this is the distinction in the language. When somebody says, give it to him and I'll be on the hook, you're actually making the lender your shaliach to actually give the item. So that's why you have a higher degree of responsibility.
So the way it works, it's as opposed to the borrower getting a guarantor.
That's right. Here, the guarantor is actually initiating the loan. So, right? That's what. So I drew it that way. The guarantor is actually saying, "Do me a favor and lend him money." That's why he's a much more, and it changes the way the language is said. Changes the whole way the whole loan is set up. So all of those are Lashon Kablonos. Now, Iboilu, here's the question marks. What if you use a mixture of the languages so that it becomes a little unclear what you mean? Halveu, lend him seems to imply the language of arevus, of guarantor. Vani kablon, but I will be a kablon. So now he's used both languages simultaneously in one sentence. Tainlo is the language of kablonos. Vani arev, but I will be a guarantor. So now again, he's flip-flopped. What happens in those cases? So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Lashon arevus, Lashon kablonos. If you say I will be an arev, you're an arev. If you say you're a kablon, you're a kablon, right? Forget the first part of your sentence. If you said tain or halveu, if you say I'm a kablon, you're a kablon. If you say I'm an arev, I'm an arev. Rav Chisda Amar Rav Chisda.
Half and half?
You cannot be half and half. Yeah, not going to work. Amar so Rav Chisda Amar Rav Chisda says, Kulan Lashon kablonos hein. All the languages that we've said are always the indication, the intention to be a kablon, bar me halva uvani arev, except if he uses very specifically double language clearly that he wants to be an arev. Otherwise, the default position is to be a kablon. Rava says, I disagree with you. Kulan lashon arevusein. It's the reverse. The default position is to be an arev. Bar mi tain lo vani no sein, except if you say, give it to him and I will give. If you make that statement, so then that's where you become a kablon. So it's just a question of what they feel is the default. So therefore, those languages that are 50-50, then Rav Chisda is going to say those are all kablonis, and Rava is going to say those are all arevus. Amar le mar, sorry.
But in essence, it's still the same thing, because if the borrower gets the guarantor for the loan,
right,
it means that the guarantor is saying, go ahead and give it to him.
Correct.
So
the practical differences. So the practical differences we started a little bit talking about before. Let's say, for example, a kablon, we said that the kablon, even if the lova has money, the lender can go and get the money from him first, right? So he doesn't have to go to the lender first, right? That was what Shimon Gamliel says. It depends if he has money or not. It doesn't make any difference between the two. But the Rabbanan said it does make a difference. You can go right to a kablon without going to the borrower first. Okay, that was the distinction between the two. Okay. Amar le Mar bar Meimer Ravashi. Mar bar Meimer says to Ravashi, Hachi Amar Abba. This is what Abba says. Tain lovani no sein. Right, give it to him and I will give. Ein lemalve al halove klum. In that circumstance, the lova is completely eliminated in that circumstance. This borrower can be eliminated once he says, "Give him the money, and I'll give it back to you." He's just the guarantor is establishing this relationship. The fact that he gives the money to him, okay, that's because the guarantor asked him to do that. But essentially, he's saying, "Take money that I'm going to pay you back and just give it to him." So therefore, the guarantor is really borrowing money from this lender, and therefore he's saying the relationship is between these two people, and don't even bother worrying about the borrower at all. Velohi, but that is not correct. Lo mifter lova mine demalva ad sheyisa v'yitem biyad. The only way to eliminate the borrower from the equation altogether, so he can choose, essentially, as we said, the Rabbanan said you could go either way. Now that he says he's eliminated, the only way to eliminate this guy altogether is for the guarantor to walk over to the lender and say, "Here's some money. Give it to the borrower," right? If they're going and giving the money back and forth that way, then that's when the borrower gets eliminated. That's the only circumstance the borrower gets eliminated. There was once a judge, and the lender came to court and said, "I would like to get my money." And it was easier, I suppose, to go get the money from the guarantor, and he seized property from the guarantor before he went to the borrower. Salke Rav Chanan braid Rav Yeva. Rav Chanan, the son of Rav Yeva, removed him from being a judge. Because Amar Rava says, Man chakim lemavid, ki ha milsa. That was such a wise thing that he did. Ilav Rav Chanan braid Rav Yeva, if it was, because that was such a wise thing, it couldn't have been anybody other than Rav Chanan braid Rav Yeva who did it. Because we hold, nichse debar inish inun ma'arvin yaseh, right? We said that a person's property becomes a guarantor for him, right? Himself, meaning the borrower has to be required to repay. Utnan, our Mishnah says, Hamalves chaver al yedei arev. If somebody borrows money from his friend, he's a guarantor for his friend. Sorry, if somebody If somebody loans money to his friend using a guarantor, lo yifra min ha'ariv, you cannot get money from the guarantor first. And we explained that was meaning that you can't go to the guarantor first. So this judge did that. He violated the rules. He went to the guarantor first. Hence, we right.
Did you lose rights for being a judge because of that?
He lost his rights to be a judge. He judged the laws wrong. And we see that when it comes to, well, we'll see it in other Gemaras, that when it comes to making a legal mistake, judges are entitled to make a legal mistake, but they're not entitled to make a legal mistake in a simple text of a Mishnah. If the Mishnah says this is the way that it's supposed to be,
You don't question
and the judge rules incorrectly on a Mishnah, then he can become, can be held liable for a false judgment, and he obviously, in this case, he can be removed from being a judge, right? Because judges are supposed to know the basic laws.
Right.
How arva de yasme de par ilamilva makme de lodinhu liyasme. There was once a fellow who was a guarantor on a loan to. He was a guarantor on a loan. He paid off. He was a guarantor on a loan to a certain individual. The individual died, so he decided, I'll pay back the loan, and then I'll go to the heirs, the orphans, who are minors in this case, and I'll get the money back from them. Okay, that was his intention. But he did it, makmi dilo dinhu liyasmi, he did it before he asked or went to the orphans for permission. He just figured, I'm a guarantor, so I'll just jump forward and I will pay it. Amar Rav Papa says, Priyas ba'chov mitzvah, v'yasme lav b'nei miyavid mitzvah ninu. He says, you can't collect from these orphans. Why? Because the obligation to repay a loan that was your father's loan is a mitzvah. And these children are minors. They're not obligated to mitzvahs. So therefore, they're not obligated to pay at all yet. You jumped the gun and you paid. Now, when they turn bar mitzvah, you can go and ask them for the money. But up until that point, you can't ask them for the money because they're not obligated to mitzvahs yet. Rav Huna, brother of Yeshua, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, said, Amar tsariri at fisei. You know why he can't collect? He can't collect because we don't know if the father, during his lifetime, gave little bundles of coins as part of the repayment of the debt. So you jumped forward and you repaid the entire debt. You didn't give the orphans the right or the ability to go to court and make their claim. Maybe their claim would have been, we don't owe that money. Maybe they would have made a claim that our father paid it off. We don't know what the claim would have been. You didn't wait. And the orphans can't go to court yet because they're not 13 yet. So therefore,
You have a messenger or a shliach to go.
You can't have a shliach go to court on their behalf. They have to be able to make their own claim. So therefore, you got to wait. You can't collect the money yet. My beinaihu, what is the difference? At the end of the day, neither of them are going to be able. Both of them agree that you're not going to be able to get the money back from these orphans until they turn 13. Let's say there could be a circumstance when the father, on his deathbed, admitted that he owed the loan. If he admitted that he owed the loan, the orphans are not liable to pay because they're less than 13. But if the issue is that perhaps the father was paying them off while he was still alive, that doesn't become an issue anymore, and then you would be able to collect from the orphans.
You mean like bribing them or whatever?
No. I mean like they didn't pay it off, right? He admitted, I didn't pay it, right? Inami, or else dishamtuhu umes bishamte, or else he was already involved. The father was already involved in a court case. He was refusing to pay. The court penalized him by putting him in Yereim, and he died while he was still in Yereim. Why does that make a difference? Because if he had been paying the loan back, they would have taken him out of Yereim. The fact is that the court had proven that he wasn't paying, and that's why he was in Yereim, and that's why he died that way. So therefore, he clearly didn't repay. Again, another proof that he didn't repay, according to the opinion that says that the children don't repay because they're not bar mitzvahed, so they're not going to repay. They can't pay back this guarantor yet. But according to the opinion that says that they're not repaying because maybe the father paid some back, we have sort of an indication that the father did not pay it back yet. Shalchu mitam. So they sent from Eretz Yisrael, and they asked the following question, right? On machlokas on this point. Shamtu umes bishamte. Let's say somebody was put in excommunication, he's not repaying his loans, and then he died in that status. Hilchasa karav huna braid for Rav Yeshua. So in that circumstance, the halacha is like Rav Huna braid Rav Yeshua, that the orphans are then obligated to pay, right? They
Even if they're minors?
even if they're minors, right? Because that's he says that would be right, because that's because shazu mitzvah bilvad she'ein chayavim ba, right? That's not because that is it's seems like they're suggesting that the halachas are Rav Huna B'Rav Shua that that it doesn't matter that he's not obligated, they're not obligated in mitzvahs yet. Once you've proven that they haven't paid, then they have an obligation to pay. Meisvei, but we ask the following question: Arev shahaya shtar chov yotze mitachas yado. If you have a guarantor and he had a contract that indicated that he had paid a debt on behalf of the borrower, okay, and he's raising up this contract. He's saying, "Look, I paid the debt off for you, so now you owe me the money. I would like you to pay back." Eino gova, so he's not going to be able to collect with using that contract. He can't use that contract to collect because there could be any number of reasons why he has that contract. That contract doesn't his possession of that contract doesn't indicate that he paid it back and therefore got that contract. However, let's say it's written on the contract that the person who lent the money says, "I got the money from you." Okay, so now gova, now he can collect. So Bishlam Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua Mishkachas law. So I understand how this could work according to Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, because Keshechayev Modeh, this could be a circumstance where the person who is obligated, he admits, he says, "Yeah, I still owed the money." Right, and now the person says that the guarantor paid, and so now the guarantor can come and say, "I would like to collect." El Rav Papa Kasha, but according to Rav Papa, so Rav Papa, you've got according to Rav Papa who says the issue is that they are minors. So then, why would he still? Why is it that even though once the guarantor has signed on his document, he says, "I would like to. I actually paid." How's that going to be any benefit to force the orphans to pay? At the end of the day, they're still under bar mitzvah. So therefore, regardless, okay, great, you've got it in writing. That makes it much stronger, but it's still only a mitzvah. So they're not going to pay. So why would they have to?
And maybe that seems that they probably do not account yet, or they have problems with math or whatever it is.
Sorry.
They could also have problems with counting or math as well at the same time.
Well, that's going to be but that'll be Rav Huna. That would be Rav Huna, Breder of Yeshua's side, that they can't make a claim yet, right? Then that would be a reason. But according to Rav Papa, regardless, it doesn't make any difference. You can have all the proofs in the world. You're never going to collect from these orphans, right? Because they're just not bar mitzvah. Right. So
why is it obvious that if the guarantor goes ahead and pays while the orphans are underage, they cannot pay?
Yep.
That after they become 13,
it's not going to be so. We are skipping a step. At some point, they're going to go to court.
Okay.
And it could be that they could have a claim. Correct. Yeah. Right. But they're saying that you can't even make your claim now. Right? It's true. The orphans could come to court and prove that they already paid. At which point, the guarantor jumped the gun. It's his problem.
Or it could be that the loan was forgiven.
Correct.
Then, whatever.
So all that is true. But I think that their point is only that we cannot take this case to court yet, because either they're underage, they're not even obligated to pay anyway, and you can't have a court case. It's almost like what we call in modern law, we call it having standing, right? You have to have somebody to be involved in the court case. The children are young; they can't even be involved in a court case yet, or they're too young to even make a claim. So therefore, they can't even be brought to court to make their claim. You're right; it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to lose the court case and have to pay. Yeah. Okay. So the answer is fine. Shani Hasam, that's different. He says that's going to be different because that is the reason why he had him write the words down in this contract that you paid, right? Because now the loan becomes a loan through a contract. And a loan through a contract, you can collect from heirs even if they are minors, because that is more than simply a mitzvah, right? A mitzvah obligates, but it's actually a shibud. It actually creates a binding on the property of the heirs and inheritors, and they're going to be able to collect. So therefore, it's different. The reason why it's different, according to Rav Papa, is more than a mitzvah issue. Once you've got it written, so then it's collectible. Hahu arva de ove kochavim. No new case. There was once a guarantor for a loan made by a non-Jew. Depar le ove kochavim makmi dilatav inhu liyasmi. And the fellow paid back this non-Jew before he came to collect from the orphans. Amar le Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi. So Rav Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Avimi mi Hagrunya mishmei de Rava. This is what Rav Avimi from Hagrunya said in the name of Rava. Afilu l'man damar chayshin litzrari. Even according to Rav Huna B'rei Rav Yeshua, who said that we're worried that he might have paid a little bit at a time. Hani midli Yisrael. That would only occur if the lender was a Jew. If the lender was Jewish, then it's possible that the borrower could have been paying a little bit off at a time.
Is there proof though?
There's no proof. That is true. There's no proof, and that's sort of a point, right? But aval ovei kochavim, if the lender was a non-Jew, kaven de Basra arva, since we're going after the azil, so kaven de Basra arva azil lo chayshinan litzrari. So he says, when it comes to a non-Jew, though, right? So he's not going to be giving him little bits of money at all, because we're not sure that there's going to be any proof to it, and then the person's going to go after the guarantor and say, I'd like all the money, right? A Jew, we were going to presume there's a certain amount of honesty there, and so therefore, if I gave him a little bit of extra, the guy's going to say, look, I got some extra money, and he won't collect illegally. But for a non-Jew, he wouldn't have done that.
But if you don't have the money,
if he doesn't have money, he's not going to pay, right? Always the case. Amar le, so he says to him, Adirabba. He says, no, the reverse is true. Afilu amanda amar lo chayshin litzrari. According to the opinion that says we don't worry about them paying back too early, honey midli Yisrael. That is by a Jew. A Jew, he's not going to pay. Aval ovdei kachavim kevan de dinaihu basar arva azli. So he's going to say that, well, the non-Jews, we said the Persians have this wacky law. The Persians have this wacky law that you're going to be able to skip the borrower altogether, and a creditor can go right to the guarantor and take the money.
How does that work, though?
Well, you said it doesn't make sense, but that was how the Persians rule. That's what the Persians' rule was. So when you're dealing with a non-Jew, so say kavan de dinaihu basar arva azli, since that was the law that you're going to go after the guarantor. Ilav de at fesei tzrari mikara lo hava mekabel. He said that if he was not paying small amounts of money to this guarantor, giving him, I guess, a little bit of extra, the guy would not have been a guarantor in the first place, because he knows he's at greater risk. So if it's a non-Jew, we might even think that it's possible that the borrower may have given money, seems like to the guarantor, in advance to make him into a guarantor. He's more likely to have given some money away first, because why would a person be crazy to jump into being a guarantor if that's going to wind up causing him a loss at the end of the day? Okay, so therefore it could be the opposite. It could be that he's more likely to have given away money if the lender was a non-Jew. Okay. Rabbi Gamliel says, so we had the circumstance that if somebody becomes a guarantor for a woman and her ksuba. And he said that the difference when we had the case of the woman and her ksuba was that if the husband gets divorced from his wife and they're going to collect from the guarantor, they had better swear that they're never getting back together again, because we were concerned that the husband and wife may be making a deal together, right? Pulling fast.
Have they ever done before where they said they broke?
I'm sure if they came up with the idea that it should be disallowed, it's because somebody came up with the idea, right? Okay, Moshe Bar Atzri. Moshe Bar Atzri was an Arva de Ksuba Sod de Kalsei. He became the guarantor on his daughter-in-law's ksuba, meaning his son was getting married, and he wanted to become the guarantor for his son's ksuba.
Is he allowed to, though?
Of course he can, yep. He can be the guarantor. Hava Rav Huna Brei Tzur B'Mirabanan. His son Rav Huna was a young rabbinic scholar and in Kolel. So therefore, Hava, he was Udechika Milsa, he was struggling financially. Okay? So now, right? That's what it said, right? He's struggling financially. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says went to the rabbi and said, what do I do? So Abaye says, Leka denazel denas be eitza l'Rav Huna, denigrisha l'dvisu. Let's give advice to Rav Huna. Give advice that he should divorce his wife, v'tezel v'tagbe ksuba me'avua, and then he'll go and he will collect the ksuba from his father. That's the way he'll get his father to give him some money. What bothered me about the story is, why didn't he just go ask his father, right? It seems like he should. The answer is not every father is happy about their son staying in Kola for all the time, so who knows, maybe he didn't want to give him money.
He was too afraid that his father might give him musser.
Maybe that's right. So it sounds like he couldn't have gone to the solution of simply going to his father and asking for money apparently wasn't an option. Right. So they had this backup plan, right? They were going to advise Rav Huna go and get divorced, and then your father will have to pay the ksuba, and then you get remarried. It's a great deal, just like their case in our Mishnah. So v'hadar niadre, and then you'll go get married again. Amar le Rava. So Rava said v'ha yadirena hana'atnan, but you can't do that. Our Mishnah says that if they do that, they have to take a neder that they're never going to get hana, and that's going to be a problem. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says atukol de megarsh bebeidina megaresh. He says, who says they have to do it in Beis Din? If they go to Beis Din, sure, the Beis Din's going to force him to make that neder. But he could just take two witnesses one night, just write a divorce contract, hand it over to his wife. There will be no Beis Din to force him to make that oath, and then it'll be effective, and that'll be that.
That'll be fraud as well, though.
It's not fraud, it's just tricky.
Yeah.
Right? It seems like, right? But that was the idea that they had.
Even if you're in Koel, you could be,
Yeah.
Right? Well,
it's
sounding. By the way, it's crazy. You see this. This is Rava. This is Abaye. These are the biggest Torah scholars in the generation. It could have been that they were all mad at the father for not supporting his son. Right? It could be that what was happening here is that they were all on the side of Rav Huna because he was doing right, and they were mad. Why is my father giving me money to support me? I need money, and they're like, We'll make your father pay. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out how we're going to do it.
There are ways. We got connections, all right. There are ways.
L'sof, at the end, the story happened. Igoy Milsa de Kohen, who it turned out Rav Huna was a Kohen, so he couldn't do it anyway. Right? So Amar Abaye says, Hainu Damrinchi, that's what people say. Basra, Anya Azla Anyusa, being poor chases poor people. What are you going to do? You can't get around it, right? That's just Rav Huna's stuck. That's his mazel. Okay. Umiyamar Abaye Hachi. Did Abaye really say such a thing? V'ha'amar Abaye. Abaye says, Ezahu Rasha Arum. How could Abaye be giving advice to Rav Huna to do such a thing? Wasn't it Abaye who said, you know who's a brazenly wicked person? Arum literally means naked. He's nakedly wicked, right? You know who that is? Zeha Mesi Eitzah. This is somebody who gives the following clever advice. Lim Korban Chasim. Let's say somebody says, you know, I've got some property, I've got a house, right? It's a mansion. You know what I want to do? Once I die, I'm going to leave it to my friend so-and-so. And then when he dies, I'd like for him to pass it on to my other friend so-and-so. And then just that way, they can use the house, each person. That's the way I want it to go. Okay, so the halacha is that during the time that the first person is in the house, he's the legal owner. So what if he sells it? He's allowed to. And if he sells it, that prevents it from going to the next person. So Abaye says, if somebody gives a guy that advice, that's sneaky, it's wicked, that's not nice.
Yeah,
okay?
It's like you're being a snake over there.
Right. So Abaye is the one who says, don't do that. And then he's telling meanwhile over here, he's telling Rav Huna to figure out ways to get money from the father. So he says, right, it's Rav Shimon Gamliel beno she'ani. So he says, so like we can say this was Rav Shimon Gamliel's idea, right? That you can get the property, sell it, and then you keep the money. You don't have to pass it on to the next guy. So the answer is beno shani v'tzur b'mirabanan shani. You know why he was making exceptions? Because this was the guy's son, and he was a Torah scholar. So potentially what was happening here is that there was some conflict between the father and the son, and because he was they said, you really have to support the son, and because he was a Torah scholar, they were making exceptions to try to figure out, even though it wasn't the cleanest of approaches, they were allowing for this to go through because of those two reasons. Now, the ha'arev hu, but at the end of the day, he was a guarantor, right? V'kaim alon, arev diksuba lo mishtabed. We're going to see later on that we're going to learn that somebody who is a guarantor in Iksuba is not really a guarantor. Why? Because he doesn't mean it. He just presumes the marriage is going to go through. He's just like a stand-in, like a best man. He's standing there. I'll guarantee it. Yeah. Nobody expects the marriage to break up when they're at the chuppah, right? So therefore, he's not mishtabed. So the answer is kablan hava. No, this father was actually a kablan. He was really interested. So Shapir. So that's fine, according to the opinion, who holds that if somebody's a kabbalan for a ksuba, right, that even though the Baal has no money, he's involving himself. Elamanda Amar Islay Mishtabed, Ilaslay Lo Mishtabed, Ma'ikal Memar. But what about the opinion that says that if the guy has money, then he's becoming a kabbalan? But if he has no money, then he's not really becoming a kabbalan. Why would a person say to be a guarantor if the guy had money? Because he doesn't expect to have to pay, right? But if the guy had no money, even being a kabbalan, he wouldn't take upon himself. That's too risky. Look, the guy's a pauper. He's getting married. He's taking upon a huge debt upon himself, and you're going to take the responsibility for that? Nobody would take that responsibility. Even if you're saying you're a kabbalan, you're not. So then if that's the case...
He's being a smart aleck there.
He's being intelligent to prevent himself from getting himself into financial trouble. So now the question is, if this fellow Rav Huna had no money, how did his father become a kabbalan for him? So, Iboy Sema, if you want, I will say Mihavi Have Le Ve'ishtaduf. Could be that Rav Huna originally had money and it got swept away and washed away, drowned or whatever. His property got ruined and he wound up with nothing. So his father originally became a kabbalan because he had money. Or V'iboy Sema, Abba Legabi Breishi Bude Mishabi Nafshe. That normal people wouldn't take on this kind of responsibility, this kind of debt responsibility, but a father would do so for his son. So therefore, he really became a kabbalan. Okay. Now, to Itmar, as we said, Arev. This is where we're going to quote the full text of what we were just quoting. Arev diksuba. Let's say somebody says, "I will be a guarantor to ksuba." Divrei hakol lo mishtabed. Everyone agrees that was not a serious promise. He isn't really becoming the guarantor. Kablan de balchov. If somebody says, "I'm going to be a kablan for a debt," divrei hakol mishtabed. Everyone agrees that's for sure, right? If he's saying I'm a kabbalan, that's the highest level of certification, of guarantee. So for a loan, right, he's definitely jumping in. Kabbalan de ksuba, but if somebody says he's going to be a kabbalan for a ksuba, the arev de balchov, or he's going to be a guarantor on a balchov, those are the gray areas. Pligi, that's where the argument is. Marsavar, one opinion says, I isle nichse lelova mishtabed, if the lova has money, then the man really is taking a financial risk, and that's okay. He's ready to do it. Then he's mishtabed. Ilaisle, but if the lova has no money, then we would consider this, I suppose, an asmachta, right? He had no intention. He was just trying to encourage the guy to make the loan. He had no intention of stepping up, lo mishtabed, and therefore his property is not mortgaged to this loan as the guarantor. Umar Savar, the other opinion says, Bain Isle, Bain Leisle, Mishtabed, that it doesn't matter either way, he intended to get involved in this and to guarantee the loan. The Hilchasa, the halacha is, Arev, when it comes to being a guarantor, Bain, and this is where your issue is, what's the difference between the kabbalan and the Arev? Here's the summary. Arev, when it comes to being a guarantor, Bain Isle, Bain Leisle, whether the person has money or he does not have money, Mishtabed, then he is guaranteeing and he's involved in that debt. Bar me Arev diksuba, except if he's being a guarantor in ksuba. A guarantor in ksuba is not really taking that responsibility on. De'afagav de'isle lebal, even though the husband may even have money, lo mishtabed, as an Arev, he's not going to be taking on that responsibility. That is not his intention. My taima, what is the reason for that? Mitzvah hu de'ovid v'lav midei chasra, because what was he trying to do? He was just trying to get the woman to agree to marry the guy. And that is a mitzvah, right? Everybody knows a shadchan makes a little bit of a fib here or there. So that's okay. He was doing a mitzvah in order to be able to bring them together. And not only that, she's not losing either because she wants to get married. So she can't claim, you tricked me into making like a loan. You tricked me into loaning the money by saying that you were going to guarantee and you didn't really mean it. Not so here. You didn't trick anything into anybody because she didn't get married in order to collect her ksuba in the event of a divorce. She got married because she wanted to get married. And so
family.
And that's right. So therefore, that was not the, there's no trickery here against her.
Right. So there is a difference between 2 days, for example, right? A guarantor, they have to check whether he has the means to be a guarantor. Here, obviously...
Yes, it does not seem like it was so. In fact, that we had said before that somebody might consider it a privilege to be considered a guarantor because it means that people it's all based on reputation. Right. Mm-hmm. Right? It's all based on reputation. And people like the fact that people consider me a reputation. Mm-hmm. That'll come up again. Amar Rav Huna says, Shchiv Meirah. Just for good measure. We didn't want to leave the Shchiv Meirah behind us. Somebody who's about to die, right? Shehiktish kol nechasav. He says, all of my property is going to the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? Now, what would happen if he gets better? It's reversed. Right? Just make. Right. Ve'amar, and he says, Mana leploni biyadi. And he says, well, 100 of something, I owe so-and-so. So 100 of this doesn't go to Hektish. 100 of this is a loan that goes to so-and-so. So Naaman, he's believed to make that statement, and therefore 100 of it is not given to the Beis HaMikdash, and the person can collect it. Why is he believed? Chazaka inanam osa kinunya al hektish. We have a presumption people don't make a trick in order to steal money from the Beis HaMikdash. That's not what people. That's not your trick on your deathbed, no less. Right?
Not advisable.
Maskif lo Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman asks the following question: V'chi adam osa kinunya al banov. Would a person make trickery using his son? But what about this? To Rav and Shmuel. Look what Rav and Shmuel say. Damri Tavayu, both of them said, Shriv Meira. Here's another case of Shriv Meira. Sha'amar, he said, Mana leploni biyadi. So-and-so, I owe so-and-so 100. Amar Tanu, if he says, get to his son, he gives him the command, give him the money, Nostin, then we are going to have him give the money. Then we're going to have the kids pay that debt. Lo Amar Tanu, if he doesn't say give the money, Ein Nostin, then we don't. Now what are you saying? Somebody's playing a trick here. He said that he owes the money, and then his kids don't really have to pay because they don't owe the money. We just said a person doesn't make tricks with the hektish. He makes tricks with his kids. Alma, so that is to say, Adam asri shelo lahasbias banov. He says, actually, you know what it is? Why would a person do that? Because he knows his kids are going to inherit all of the property. He doesn't want everybody to think that his kids are so rich. Everybody come knocking, all the Meshulachim come, right? So we don't want everybody to know that the kids are so rich. Therefore, he makes up a story. Oh yeah, but kids, you owe so-and-so a lot of money. And in the end, they really don't. That makes sense why he would say it. So if he said, you owe him a lot of money, give him the money, that means he really owed it. But if he just says, you owed him the money, but he doesn't leave it there, he doesn't tell them to pay, then we're going to presume he was just saying it in order to protect the people wouldn't know that that the kids have all that money and they don't have to pay.
Does that make the kids feel bad or look bad in the end?
That they don't have as much money? He's worried. It's worse sometimes to be looked at as too rich, right? When there's a campaign for Eitz Chaim on Motzei Shabbos and Sunday, then it's a little bit difficult for everybody to know that you have money because you're going to get all the people on the WhatsApp chats trying to get it from you. Hachanami, so here too. Then what's the difference when it comes to the hektish? Adam also shelo lahasbia es atzmo. A person may be in the same situation. Remember, since he gave away all of his possessions, what if he heals? What if he gets better? Then all the possessions are going to come back. Well,
what if they don't want to give back his possession?
He said Shchiv Meira, he gets all his possession back. So when he gives everything away, he gets it all back, right? Well, now people are going to go, whoa, look at how much money this guy had. So therefore, maybe it makes sense. He said, oh, no, 100 of this wasn't mine. Also, the Rashbam says, it could be, regardless of whether he gets it back and gets better, people are going to say, I didn't know he was that rich. Look at how much money he had. And he didn't give anything to tzedakah, that guy. I didn't know how rich he was. So therefore, he doesn't want anybody to know how rich he was. Right? That's another explanation. So maybe he has a reason why he's lying about the loan, and why should we believe it and not give it to hektish? So Kikama Rav Huna Hasam Denakit Shtara. So he says, no, Rav Huna's example was that there was a contract for this circumstance. It's a contract. Miklal de Rav Shmuel de Lo Nakit Shtara means that Rav and Shmuel, in the case of the kid, there was no contract. So Amar Tnu Nostin, but we said that if he says give it, so then we're going to give the loan. So why should that be? Milval Pehava, there's no contract. It's an oral loan. And we said about oral loans, Rav Shmuel Damri Tavaya, both Rav and Shmuel said about oral loans. Milval Peh Eino Gova Lo Min Ayorshin Velo Min Halakuchos. That an oral loan doesn't get paid back by the heirs. So then why is it that if he said, oh, there's a loan, pay him, and there's no contract, why are the orphans being forced to pay? Elam Rav Nachman, as Rav Nachman says, no. The case is that he really does have a contract. There is a contract there. Velo kasha. It's not a contradiction. Ha de mekuyam, ha de lo mekuyam. What happens is in the case of the hektish, the shtar was already sealed and signed by Beis Din and certified. So therefore, we're going to pay. We know that he's not lying. The case by the kids, the contract was not signed and sealed by Beis Din yet. So what happens? Amar Tnu, when the person on his deathbed said, pay it, that was an admission. And once he has an admission, kaimei lishtare, he has self-certified that contract by the admission. Normally, you got to go to Beis Din, but since he's a shchivmer and he's in his deathbed, he has extra power with the words that he says. So if he admits that this is a loan that he owes, that contract becomes certified. Now that the contract is certified, it becomes a milveh bishtar, and now it's payable from the orphans. Lo amar tnubi, if he doesn't say give it, lo kaimei lishtare, then he hasn't certified the contract, in which case it remains a milveh al peh, and you're not going to be able to get it from the orphans.
Has it ever happened where people say they were basically bereaved, they were fraud or Saying to be a big sin?
Any question, I said, any question that starts with, has there ever been a case? The answer is yes. I'm sure somebody's done something like that at some point all the time. Amar Rabba says, Shchiv Meira Shamar Mona Leploni Biyadi. Somebody says, right, Shchiv Meira says that so-and-so, I owe so-and-so 100, right? The Amru Yisomin, and the orphans, after he passes away, say, Paranu, we paid it. Okay? No, our father said it, but we paid it. Ne'amanin, so we believe them. Tanu, if the guy was on his deathbed, he said, give him the money, Mana Leponi, give so-and-so this money, Vamar Yisomim Paranu, and the Yisomim say we paid, Ein Ne'amanin, we don't believe them. Klapelaya, that doesn't make any sense, it should be the reverse. Ibcha Mistabra, because Amar Tanu, if the guy said give it, then we know that the guy really owes the money. So Mana came into Paskei Avu and Lemilsa, since the father was very clear about the issue, Ikalamemer de Pare, it makes sense that the orphans would have said, oh, if dad's that serious about the fact that he owes the money, let's go pay it. And it makes sense that they would pay it. Mana Leploni Biyadi, but if he just says, hey, so-and-so owes me money, Kavan de Lo Posek Avu and Lemilsa, since the father didn't say, go give him the money, Ikalamemer de Lo Pare, it makes sense that they wouldn't have paid it. So then why would you say that you believe him that he paid? Ella. If you're going to say it, it's got to be like this. Somebody who's about to die and he says that I have so-and-so's 100 in my possession. For Amru Yisomim, the heir said, our father changed his mind and he said, I paid it. Then he's Ne'amanin. Then he's believed. Why? My taima? Adkuri midkar. He must have remembered. In other words, he said, I owe so-and-so money. And then he says, he doesn't say pay. He says, I owe so-and-so money. Then he says, oh, forget it. I paid it. Then the Yisomim are believed because he never said pay. He just mentioned that he owed the money. Tnu mana leploni, if he says give money to so-and-so, the Amr Yisomim chazar, and the Yisomim say no, he changed his mind, the Amar Rabba prati, and he says I paid, ein nemanin. Then you don't believe them. Why? Dim isa de pare, if the father had paid, lohav Amr tnu, he would not have been so definite on his deathbed and said, pay it. Boi Rava. Rava says, Shchiv Meira, last Shchiv Meira case of the Gemara. Shchiv Meira Shahoda, you're going to miss him, Shchiv Meira Shahoda, let's say he admits, Mahu. So what is the circumstance? Tzarech Lomar Atem Edai, if he says, look, I owe the money. Does he have to? Normally a circumstance when we talk about, let's say somebody walks over to a guy and says, you owe me $1,000. He says, sure I do. Do we believe him? No, because he's probably just trying to get rid of this guy. Yeah. However, he says, you're right, I do. You're my witness, you're the witness. You can write it down. If he says, you're my witness and you're my witness, then you do believe him. If he says, write it down, you do believe him. So this guy comes to the Shchiv Meira and he says, you owe me money. He says, yes, I do. Does the fact that he's a Shchiv Meira mean he's being serious?
No.
Or, well, on his deathbed, does he do that anymore? Or does he have to designate witnesses like Yehuda is saying that maybe he should have to? So he says, Tzarech lomar atem edai, o ein tzarech lomar atem edai. Does he have to designate witnesses or not? Tzarech shiomar ksuvu, does he have to say write it down? O ein tzarech lomar ksuvu, or does he not have to say that? Adam mishat b'shas misa, o ein adam mishat b'shas misa. The question is, does a person joke around or fool around when he's about to die or not? So Basra Dabai, Hadar Pashtel. After he asked that question, he answered it. Ein adam mishad b'shas misa. When a person's about to die, he's not fooling around. The divrei shchiv meira kiksuv and mesur and damusa. Therefore, when a person is a shchiv meira, his words are like they are signed, sealed, and delivered. That's it, right? So you don't have.
Assuming that the person who's dying,
correct,
is in full
faculties. Correct. Yes.
Because otherwise
it's illegal. Right? He's considered shota. In which case, nothing that he says matters. Right? He's got to be clear.
Right.
Next Mishnah. Hamalves chaver b'shtar. Somebody loans money to his friend with a contract. Then the person who has the contract can collect all of the property that is possessed by the borrower at the time of the loan, becomes a mortgage, and even if he sells it to somebody else, the lender can collect it from the people who he sells it to. Al yedei edim, if it is an oral loan and there are just witnesses involved, then you can only collect from property that is in the possession of the borrower at the time of the collection. Hotzi alav ksav yodo. Let's say the person has his own IOU in his own handwriting. Shehu chayev lo, and he says, I owe you. Gova minachas minichorin. That counts like an oral loan, and he can collect from just the plain unencumbered properties. Orev hayotzi la'acher chisum. Let's say shtaros. Let's say somebody says, I'm a guarantor, but it's written in the contract after the witnesses. So the witness is already signed. Underneath that, he says, and I'm the guarantor. So, govim nechosim nechorin. That's considered like not part of the contract. Therefore, it's an oral guarantee, and since it's an oral guarantee, you can only collect from non-mortgaged properties. Maisa, there was a story. Baal, if they were Shmuel, came before Shmuel Omar, and he said, "Go and he said, you can only collect from the non-mortgaged properties. Amar Lo, he said, Amar Lo ben Nanas. Ben Nanas says, Eina gova lo menachas mishubanim v'lo menachas mechorin. You don't collect from either of those properties. Amar Lo lama. He says, why? Amar Lo harei achonik es echad bashuk. Let's say somebody's walking down the street and he sees a guy choking another guy. Okay, umatzo chavero v'amar lo hanachlo. He says, leave him alone. And he says, but he owes me money. I'll pay you the money. Just leave him be. Just leave him be. Right? Potter. He's exempt. He's exempt from being the guarantor because he's not trying to be the guarantor. He's trying to save the guy's life. See, because that wasn't because, and also says the Gemara, why? Because the guy didn't loan the money to this fellow in the first place based on the trust of this guarantor. This guarantor just happened to come along later. So it's not, he's not related to the loan, so therefore that's not, he's not involved in it. Ela ezehu orev, what makes somebody a guarantor? Shu chayev, that is obligated to pay. Halvehu, if he says to him, lend it to him, vani nosein lach, and I will be the one who pays. That means that the creditor only made the loan because of your guarantee. In that circumstance, that's where the orev can be liable. He's chayev. Shekein al amunaso, because it was based on the trust of the guarantor that the loan was made. Vam Rabbi Yishmael says, this is a great end of the last Mishnah in Bava Basra. Somebody wants to be smart. Yasok b'dinei mamonus. You really should learn these laws. Dinei mamonus. Twist your brain around a lot, right? Shein lecha miktzah b'Torah yoser mehen. There's no greater corner of the Torah than this at twisting your mind. Vehein kemayan hanoveya. It's like a sprouting spring, and it's tricky. It's difficult, but it gets your brain going. And if somebody really wants to get involved in learning these laws well, Yishamis to Shimon ben Nanas, then you better learn from Shimon ben Nanas, because Shimon ben Nanas was an expert at it. Says the Gemara, Amar Ula. Ula says, Davar Torah echad malva b'shtar v'echad malva al peh gov v'nechash mishubadim. You know, we just said that it makes a difference whether it is a oral loan or a contract loan, whether you can repossess land that's been sold. If it's in a contract, you can repossess land. If it's an oral loan, you can't repossess land. But he says Ula, really, from the Torah, it doesn't make a difference. The Torah says that you always can repossess. My taima shibud d'oraisa. So he says, because it's a Torah law. Why is it that the rabbis changed it and said that we're not going to collect from the mortgaged properties, from sold properties, in the case of an oral loan, only from the unencumbered properties, because we didn't want to ruin people who are making purchases. Okay, so people are making purchases, they at least can look at contracts and find out that the property is under a mortgage. But if every time there's a oral loan, you're going to take property back from sales, then the people who make purchases are going to be always in trouble. If that's true, milva b'shar nami. So then why also, if you're going to protect the people who made purchases of property, so then why do you take property back from people in a circumstance where the loan was made in a contract? So the answer is Hosam inhu ninhu daf sidur nafshayu. The answer is because they should have done the investigation. You do the investigative work, do the research, find out what contracts are on this property. You caused the loss to yourself. You didn't do the research. That's your own fault. Okay? You can't research oral loans. There's no documents to look at, but you can research written loans. Rabbi says no. He says the reverse. Davar Torah echad milva b'shtar v'echad milva pe'enu govel minchasim bnei chorin. He says really, the Torah says you're never allowed to take possession of property that's been sold for a loan, whether it's oral or in a contract. My time, why is that? Because she buda lav de'oraisa. This concept of repossessing property is not a Torah concept; it's a rabbinic concept. Umatam amru milva b'shtar govel minchasim mishuda abadim. Then why do the rabbis make such a law that if you are making a purchase, if you're making a loan through a contract, that you can repossess land? Because the rabbis were concerned that people would not make loans if there wasn't a guarantee on the loans. By having land as your guarantee for your loan, you increased the number of loans that would be made, and it was for everybody's benefit. If that's true, milval penami, so then if you want to increase loans, what about oral loans too? Make oral loans also certified by land. Hasam leis le kala. The answer is we don't want to do that, because then people won't be able to find out about the loans that were made, and then again, it's going to cause a negative impact on the sale of properties. So we're trying to create some kind of balance where we are going to encourage people to make loans, but we're not going to discourage people from making purchases. Well, mi amar Rabba hachi. Did Rabba really say that? V'hamar Rabba says gavu karka yesh lo, gabu mos ein lo. So he says, if let's say somebody collects from a loan, he collects land, so then the bechor, the firstborn, can take a double portion. And if he collects money from the loan, the firstborn cannot take a double portion. Now, what influences whether a bechor can take a double portion or not? The fact that the Torah obligates or allows that money to be collected. So therefore, if a person goes and collects from land, it goes as a double portion to the firstborn because it must be that there's a mortgage on that property. So therefore, and the land and the money, you can't because there's no mortgage on movable properties. So this indicates that a mortgage, this shibud, is in the Torah. Otherwise, why would a firstborn be able to take a double portion? So how can Rabbah tell us that the Torah doesn't account for this mortgage or the repossession of property when a firstborn is able to take land, which indicates the Torah does give allowance for repossessing of property? So v'chitema epoch de Rabbah le'ula u'ula l'Rabbah. Maybe you just flip Ula and Rabbah around. Maybe Rabbah is the one who says that shibud is in the Torah, that this concept of repossessing land is in the Torah, and Ula is the one who says it's not. V'hamar Ula, don't say that either, because Ula is the one who said, Davar Torah ba'chov dine beziboris. He says from a Torah law, right, when a person comes to collect land, as his repossession, if he's repossessing land, he repossesses the cheapest possible land. He has the lowest quality land. The Chachamim elevated and said that you're going to be able to take a higher quality, but the Torah says just take the lowest quality land. So then the question is, why does Ula say that? Because somebody's got to be the one who says that the Torah doesn't allow you to repossess land. So the answer is, Rabba taima de b'nei marava kamar, v'lei lo svira lei. Rabba was not saying that he himself holds that the Torah allows you to repossess land. He was just explaining the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael who said that a firstborn can take a double portion. He was saying that's because they hold that the Torah allows you to collect and repossess land. But I don't hold that way, Rabbi says. I don't hold that way. But those rabbis who do allow the firstborn to take double, it's because they hold of this concept that the Torah allows you to repossess land. Okay? So that's what he was just explaining their viewpoint. Rav Shmuel Damar Tavayu. Rav and Shmuel, both of them say, Milva al peh eno gova lo mina yorshin. If somebody has an oral loan, you cannot collect from heirs. Velo mina lekuchos. You also can't seize and repossess property, as we just said. My timer, what's the reason? Shibuda lav deoraisa, because the concept of repossessing land is not a Torah concept. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Damar Tavayu, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon Lakish in Eretz Yisrael said the reverse. Milva al peh gova mina yorshin. He says that a loan that is oral, you can collect it from the heirs. Ubein mina lekuchos, and also you can collect it from repossession of a sale. My timer, what is their reasoning? Shibuda deoraisa. They held that the Torah does allow you to repossess property. Meisve. So he asked a question. Let's say somebody digs a pit in a public thoroughfare. Okay, this is a way throwback, right, to much earlier in the Bavas. V'nafal rav shur, and this is at the beginning of Bava Kama. So now an ox comes along, falls in the pit.
Oh, you have to pay.
Yes. Oh, but even more. Now we're going to add an element. Vehar go. The guy's in the pit, still digging, and the ox falls into the pit. And he dies, kills him.
Mirrors in peace.
Putter, the person who is the owner of the ox, is not liable for any kind of, his ox doesn't have to get stoned. He's not liable for any payments for killing the guy.
He should have taken care of the ox. Much more better. Yeah.
No, because it's in public thoroughfare. He's not obligated to watch his ox walking down the street in a public thoroughfare. He can presume nobody's dug a big hole in the middle of the street. Velo, not only that, elishim meis hashur, that if the ox died by falling in this pit, Yorshe Balabor, Chayav L'Shalim, the heirs of the guy who dug the pit have to pay for the ox. Right? Insult's injury. Insult, literally. Insult, injury, right?
And or double.
So he has to pay. So he has to L'Shalim D'mei Ashur L'Ba'alav. He has to pay the money of the value of the ox to the owner. So the question is, why? This is just an oral loan. There's no contract here, and yet you're forcing the heirs to pay. We just said, according to Rav and Shmuel, right, Milva Ped does not, an oral loan does not collect from the heirs. Why are these heirs obligated to pay for the ox? Amar Bilah, Amar Rav. So Rabbi Ilah said the name of Rav. Besha Amad Bedin. The answer is they went to court. 1 second. Who went to court? Vahar Goktani. The case was the guy got smashed by the ox in the pit. How do you go to court if he's dead? Amar Ravad Barava says, Sha'aso Treifa. The guy had an ox fall on him and it mortally wounded him. And he got out of the pit before he died, like one of those movie scenes. He's on his last one. They brought him to Beis Din. They held him liable, found him guilty, made him pay, and then he died. Okay, and now then the orphans have his orphans, his heirs have to pay. But V'amar Rav Nachman said, Tani Tana, we learned about this. Umeis, the guy died. Ukfaro, and the ox buried him, so he didn't get out of the pit. So Hasam de Yosve Daini Apuma de Beira. Ready for this? They got some 3 judges. They sat on the outside of the pit, vechayvuhu, and they found him guilty. Right? You think they'd be trying to save the guy, right? No, let's bring the 3 judges in, find him guilty right there. I guess this is a theoretical case. I doubt I can imagine like the rabbi sitting around the outside. Can you hear us down there? Yeah, you're guilty.
What?
So,
I can hear you.
Okay. Amar Rav Papa says, Hilchasa, the halach is milva al peh, that if it's an oral loan, gova min hayorshin, you can collect from the heirs, because that's a mitzvah, as we said, for the heirs to pay. Ve'eno gova min halukuchos, but you cannot take property that has been sold. Gova min hayorshin kedei shelo tino delos bifnei lavin. You can collect from the heirs because we don't want to create a circumstance where people don't want to lend money because they're worried that the guy can die and get off, right? Hey, it's a great way. I got a terminal diagnosis. Let me borrow as much money as I possibly can because when I'm dead, they can't get me. So no, that's how they prevented that. The heirs are going to have to pay. Ve'eno gova min halukuchos, but you can't collect from the purchasers, people who purchase land from this fellow, delays late kala, because if it's an oral loan, there's no way for them to know about it, and there are possible misunderstandings that can occur. So while we're waiting for the rest of our minyan, we can continue a little bit further. Hotzi alav ksav yodo. Somebody has his signature on a piece of paper. It says, I owe the money, shu chayev, and he admits that he's liable for the debt. Gov min chas b'nei chor, and that's considered an oral loan. It's not considered a contract. And therefore, he only pays from the regular properties. You cannot seize properties that he sold. It's not a written contract. But because why? Because a written contract has to be based in. It has voice to it. People know about it. Why? Because it's a based in document. The fact that you wrote on a piece of paper you owe money, even though it's in writing, is not enough for people to be aware of it. Rabba bar Rav Nasan me Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Rav Nasan asks from Rabbi Yochanan, Huchsa ksav yodo based in. Let's say they take this handwritten note and they go to court. And the court investigates, looks at it, and certifies this is his handwriting. And they write 3 judges. We hereby certify that this is his handwriting. Now, does that make this into a contract? Because now 3 judges have certified it. So my Amar Lei, he said, Afa pishoch ksav yodo bebeis din eno gova el min chas min chor. He says no, it's not. Doesn't work. Even though you've got 3 judges written on it, it's better than 2 witnesses. You got 3 judges written on it. That is not a contract. Meisiv Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama asked a question on that. Shosha gittin psulin. There are 3 types of contracts that really are not. There are 3 types of gittin, of divorce contracts, that you're not supposed to write. V'im nises. But if the woman does in fact get a get with this, and she does get married, havlad kosher, the child is not a mamzer. Meaning, mi deoraisa, from a Torah law perspective, these gets work. But we don't, as a rabbinic procedure, don't like them. What are they? Ve'eluhein, here they are. Ksav biksav yado. Let's say the husband writes it in his own handwriting, and there's no witnesses on it. Okay? Minat Torah, you don't need the witnesses, and all you got to do is he has to write the get. Therefore, he did it from the Torah. That's a divorce contract. We don't like it, but it is.
There's no witnesses required if it's
not midoraisa. Midorabanan, we're going to require it, right? Yesh olav edim. Let's say there are witnesses on it, bozman, but they don't put a date on it. Again, not ideal, but it works. Yeshbo, because they hold that 80 Masira Karti, we're going to say that the witnesses are the ones who hand it over. So if the witnesses hand it over, I don't need the witnesses written on the contract, because the witnesses I'm going to check with are the ones who hand the get over. Also, the witnesses, I don't need a date because the contract itself isn't the most important thing. The witnesses that are handing over are the most important thing. Veinbo ela eid echad. What if the contract has only 1 witness? Hare elu shlosha gittin psulin. These are all 3 gets that midorabanan. We say they're no good. Vim nises, but if she uses it and gets married, havlad kosher, the child is kosher. So now, Rabbi Eliezer says, Afa pishein alav edim, even though there are no witnesses on it, and yet it's a valid contract. So if that's the case, if that's the case, so then it should be the same thing by this guy's handwritten note. There's no witnesses on it. It Okay, midoraisa, midorabanan, it's not ideal, but it should be a valid contract, and you should be able to collect from the properties that are mortgaged. El shenasnu la bifnei edim kosher. What happens is you gave this get to her in front of witnesses, then it's a valid get. The government, and so therefore, now that there are three witnesses, now that there are three judges certifying it, and it's been officially transferred and officially recognized, this should become a contract. You should be able to collect from the properties that were previously sold. No, Shani Halsam, that's different. To be Shas Ksiva, who Dishabid Nafshe, there's a difference. When they wrote the IOU, that was not a contract. You can't subsequently take this little piece of paper and turn it into a contract by adding witnesses to it. By contrast that with the divorce document, when he wrote it, he intended it as a full divorce document. He didn't do it right, but okay, it was fine. But he intended it as a divorce document, and then they had witnesses, and they went back and they fixed it up, and by transferring it over, we can use it. But it was always intended to be a divorce document. So you can't, what he says, the difference between the divorce document, which is valid, and the handwritten document, which is not valid, is that the handwritten document was never intended to be a document in the first place. And therefore, no matter how many judges you write their signatures on it, you can never turn it into a valid document. Stop here.
Wow.
Handwritten document was never